And happy Sunday. This is PFG Live. I'm Spencer Webb, and today is Sunday, the 22nd of September, 2024, and we have a crowd checking in. Welcome aboard to CJ Stevens, who reports 91 with lots of sunshine in East Tennessee. Welcome aboard, sir. He says, reminding everyone to hit the like and subscribe buttons early. Leave a comment in the chat to help the algorithm. Yeah, it's all about the algorithm. John Thawley is here. He says 74 degrees, partly cloudy with a gentle breeze in SoCal. Happy to be rid of summer. Widget Works says, comment. Thank you very much. Let's see. Evils. Who was the first one, actually? Let's roll back here. You guys are coming fast and furious. CJ Stevens reports, no, that's not it. Tucker says 79 degrees Fahrenheit and some clouds in Buffalo, New York. Welcome. Dale is with us. 17 dungarees science and cloudy in the Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Snow, Mexico. America's top hat. Welcome. Evils from Ghent says 25.7 degrees Celsius, 15.8 Celsius dew point with 58.3% relative humidity, many other numbers. Josh says in southern Manitoba, he says it's nice. He also reports a METAR, our first METAR of the morning, that winds are 290 at 5 knots, temperature 16, 2.08. Altimeter's in there somewhere. DBX, DBX is reporting from near White Plains, New York. Winds are variable at 3 knots, 10-mile visibility, few clouds at 3,700 feet, scattered 5,500 feet, temperature 2.11, altimeter 3003. A lot of symmetries there. Are you updating your METAR there, Evils? Paul Morley says Dallas is 96 degrees. Can we just take a moment? 96 degrees. And that's not in the sous vide pot, right, Paul? Who else we got here? Hey, Art That Makes Art. Wes, welcome aboard. We are having a great day. Well, as more reports come in, we will share them with you. Here in Windham, New Hampshire, it's 65 degrees, 67% relative humidity. Winds are out of the northeast at 10 miles per hour. Well, we have some interesting things for you today. Things happened this week that made me shake my fist in the air. And of course, we always like to share things that cause us to shake our fist in the air. So we have a couple of topics. One of them is parameterizationalism in Fusion, which I think you're going to like. We did have some amazing filament drying epiphanies, and we're going to be talking about that. And also, shipping sometimes sucks, and we have some shipping stories and some shipping solutions that we will be sharing. So before we get underway there, the PFG Stones report, Miami, Florida, it's on the way. Washington, I think, where are these going? Carbides are going out. I forget who had those. And my good friend in Australia, your stones are coming. He's part of the story, so we'll get to him in a minute. So let's see. That's the update on PFG Stones. We've been grinding in the shop. This weekend we got 4-inch PFG Stones done. The spreadsheet says we could relax on those, and we're in the middle of 4-inch round carbides, and I believe the spreadsheet will allow us to sleep tonight, and that's good. So just to remind you, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can, comment in the chat, and we'll be happy to take questions, comments, and snide remarks. If you're in the Discord, same thing. You could put comments in the chat, or if you have an audio question, you can raise your hand in the audience, and we can bring you in on audio also. So yeah, that's what's going on. Last week we talked about. Let's see if I could find you the slide. We talked about the successes that we had on scanning to the point where actually it's 2 weeks ago, to the point where we were actually making. Where is it? We had a good slide here. We were making parts that we had scanned, and all of that was as a result of bringing Shaylie, our intern, into the fold and helping us with making that happen. So I'm going to welcome aboard Shaylie. So there she is. Shaylie, say hi.
Hello, hello.
There, your audio is in. So Shaylie was given the mission of taming the EINSTAR scanner and making it useful. In fact, the exact mission, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Shaylie, the exact mission was to take my hand brace, my CMC joint
Yes.
brace, which is a beautifully organic shape that has no flat surfaces, and turn that into a one-to-one, perfectly usable 3D print. Now, I will point out that this is P1. So this guy lasted 15 minutes, but then P2 is not only perfect, it's in use. So that's why I don't have it here. It's in the truck. So it's really nice to slip these on when my CMC joint is going ouchy, which happens sometimes. So I wanted to bring Shaylie in and let's just go over a little bit about what happened and what was discovered and how we landed this thing. So and also Shaylie, I'd like to hear your feedback on the product and the documentation in general, because people are going to go out and
Yeah.
buy these things. I believe we spent $950. I think that was about the right price for the EINSTAR scanner. And I thought that was a good price point. There are new ones now. There are more expensive ones, of course. But what did you think of it as a product, as a package, and time to first usable scan?
Yeah, I think really with, at least for me, it was a lot of trial and error at the beginning. So the actual getting it set up and going was fairly easy for me, but then there was a lot of setting things that it was a little hard to figure out exactly what would work in what situation, which I'm sure is normal of a lot of scanners, but there were definitely some things that were not super clear in the manual that made it a little bit harder to figure out. So actual setup, getting it connected to the computer, getting it calibrated, all of that stuff, that was not too bad. Getting it to actually scan, also getting the scan started wasn't particularly difficult. So the very beginning part I thought was fairly easy, but then getting it to the point where the scan was at the right quality was sort of where that started to get more difficult. I don't know. I guess for I guess the main, if I could just go into I guess I could talk about some stuff that was the biggest realizations with the software, with what didn't quite match up to exactly what I thought it was at first.
Well,
I think the
before you do that, how much of it was hard to use documentation, and how much of it was other?
yeah. I think it's sort of, I would almost say 50-50. It was the documentation made it hard to figure out what settings it was that I was supposed to use. But then once I got past that, it was sort of just a little bit of trial and error to get it correct. So I would say almost, actually, yeah, probably more documentation than actually difficult to use. It was sort of a lot of trial and error with taking the scan in one point and just doing it again and again with different settings and seeing what worked best, and sort of taking that and comparing it to the manual and trying to figure out, like, okay, this description is actually, like, in the software doing X, Y, and Z. So it's sort of taking, some of it was sort of roughly translated, so while I had an idea of what it was supposed to be doing, I wasn't necessarily sure exactly how it was doing it, so sort of taking those scans and doing them a couple times and, like, figuring out, okay, if I leave it on this setting, then it's turning out like this, and sort of going back and forth and seeing what it's actually producing was probably the big part.
So was it a a lot of times engineers are not terribly good at explaining in clear language how to do something to somebody who doesn't have all the background. Was it a problem of vocabulary in the documentation, or was it a translation problem? It came from China. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but if I had to guess, it was not necessarily the, like, function that was difficult. It was more like there was, at least for somebody who really started off, didn't have any experience with 3D scanning at all, sort of going into that, and the settings in their, like, the EINSTAR manual was very, like, it wasn't necessarily hard to find or to use or to understand what they were trying to say, but it was also very vague. So when I was going through their manual, it was more like you would find either, like, their full manual online or, like, their website. A lot of it was like, here's the list of settings, but then you would, like, look at that setting and it would have, like, one sentence, and it wouldn't totally, sort of, at least to me, like, clearly describe exactly what it was changing. So it was more like, for example, one of the big ones for me was, like, their like, object size setting. And so, like, on their website, it sort of just had one sentence for each setting for, like, the small object mode and the large object mode, where it sort of just said, like, small objects are this size and large objects are this size, but it never really actually said what changing the setting would do. So I'd say, like, wasn't necessarily a matter of translation, but more just it wasn't as descriptive as it would have made it, like, a lot easier, because I assumed it would only change, it would optimize something that, required changing that size based on the object, but it didn't really explain what it actually changed, so it was sort of hard to figure out when it was best to use that.
Yeah, I think one of your epiphanies was that the so-called large object scan was really a larger field, and that picked up more reference points, so that it made it work better.
Yeah,
right?
that's why I use that as the example. I think probably, like you said, probably the biggest epiphany I had while using it was definitely the object mode. After doing some other research online and, like, seeing what other people had done and, sort of going outside the manual, watching some YouTube videos, things like that, I sort of eventually figured out that in any general things I could find on other people using the EINSTAR outside of the manual, that pretty much everybody says, yeah, you shouldn't use small object mode. Most people suggested that in general, you just shouldn't use that setting, because in small object mode, the thing that is actually happening within the software, which is, again, what it didn't really explain, is that it's just changing the field of view. So by selecting small object mode, it's actually making it a little bit harder to sort of fully scan the object. And it's also, excuse me, the small object mode makes it so that when you're actually doing the scan, there's basically a sidebar while you're doing the scan that says, you're too close, you're too far, you're in a good spot. And so another thing about small object mode is, because the field of view is a lot smaller, it made it really hard to, like, stay right in that right spot to get the best scan.
Yeah.
So in general, pretty much what I found is that you should almost always use large object mode. And then if you need it to be more precise or better resolution, you can just change the resolution setting within that. So for example, I think for that final piece that you have that we made, I had it in large object mode, but I had it in small object mode resolution, and that sort of combines the two things enough that it seemed to work a lot better after I figured that out. But the sort of going back to where we started, the manual just didn't really make that very clear as to what that did. So it took me a while to like figure out why is, you know, this small object that fits within its standards just not working properly.
Now you were doing your processing. You were connected to your laptop, which and we discovered something, didn't we? Everything ran on your laptop. Your laptop was a couple of generations old, but it wasn't the fastest thing in the world, but it ran, and it had
Yes.
and correct me if I'm wrong, it had an NVIDIA video
Yes. Yeah.
processor in that laptop. Well, we just got a super whoopee laptop. Nothing crazy. We got $1,000 laptop for the lab, and we went to plug the EINSTAR into the new laptop, and the software would not run because the new laptop had video processing that identified as not NVIDIA. I don't remember what it was called, but it's not NVIDIA. And it wouldn't run. So that was a real surprise. And I know from my point of view, it's like, it probably says somewhere that, gee, you need NVIDIA hardware or it's not going to run. But, I didn't know that. So that was an interesting point also.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was another thing that wasn't made super, super clear, because if I could be remembering this wrong, but if I remember correctly, they sort of had a blurb on their website about like recommended like hardware and software. And so seeing NVIDIA, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily assume you have to have NVIDIA, more just something equivalent. And it's definitely like how we compared the two computers, because I think the laptops were fairly similar. I know mine was a little bit older, but the software just would not even open. It was just like wrong graphics card and wouldn't use it at all. So definitely a good thing to note, because the software just will not run without NVIDIA.
So on this particular scan, I told folks about the thumb hole being the real problem. I put it up on the screen here so everybody could see what the shape looks like. And you learned a few things about getting that to work. It's a small hole. It has a weird aspect ratio. Talk a little bit about getting that thing right.
Yeah, so I think at first, sort of that part for me was like my finalization of figuring out how to put multiple scans together, which is like the big thing in the software. You can definitely do single scans for certain things if it doesn't have to be super precise, but definitely if you want it to be precise, you want the full object, all sides, it's definitely best to do multiple scans. And so for me, that was, I think, the first one. I had at that point figured out sort of the process for putting the scans together. But it was sort of hard for me. I still wasn't 100% sure how to identify like when they weren't quite lining up properly. So I think that was part of it. And then the other part was definitely the post-processing, and I can like go into that a little bit. So for the first scan, it was, I think I took, I want to say like 5 scans. I took, each side and like one standing straight up, because I was trying to get the sort of that hole there scanned properly to sort of see the inside and like get it smooth, which I had guessed was probably going to be pretty tricky. And so at first, with the first scan, I got it to, I guess the first step being recognize that the hole was there, because sometimes if you make it too dark, or if you like put it on a dark surface, sometimes if you're like, directly above like a black, I was using a black piece of like felt with the global markers on it. So sometimes if you scan it like that and it's too dark, the software will actually think that it doesn't go all the way through, or it's just a black texture, because the scanners do sometimes struggle with black textured objects. And so at first, I was having a little bit of trouble getting that to register as an actual hole rather than just a black surface. But that was a fairly easy fix once I took it and did the other directions. Like if I was holding it straight up, there was nothing black behind it, and then that wasn't really causing an issue. But then after that, it was mostly getting myself familiar enough with the scans to get them as smooth as I could. It was still a little tricky with the inside because pretty much no matter what I did, it had some sort of shadow. So it was sort of a post-processing thing where you had to make sure that the software didn't consider any of the shadow material, which I think wasn't too bad at first. Like, it actually did a good job at the start with its like first render of, okay, this is what we have. Some of the inside was a black color, but it did not like put material in where there wasn't supposed to be, and that was great. But then what I didn't realize at first is in like the post-processing settings, you have your texture adjustment and your hole filling and all of that stuff. And I hadn't practiced a ton with what were, the correct settings for this type of scan, because a lot of the stuff, like the stuff I had practiced with, before, didn't have the same sort of geometry, especially with that, hole with shadow and everything. So it was a little bit trickier to figure out.
Was it more lighting, or was it more giving it some reference points?
I think it was a little bit of both. I would say more lighting for sure, because it was definitely that shadow that was making it really hard for the scanner to sort of pick up what was going on. Even increasing the brightness, on the software I could see it was like recognizing that it was there, but it was still just really struggling to get like the detail. I also did try at one point putting like a reference dot on the inside just to see if I could get it to like pick up on that, and it did, which actually helped a little bit. But then it still sort of, when it got to that dot point, it sort of like bubbled up a little bit over where it was, because it was still, it was catching that point, and then everything else was kind of off a little bit. So
going into this scanner, did you have any experience with any other scanners?
No.
Okay. So would you say that, I mean, it's also hard to judge. This is a $950 price point. We just had a couple other scanners announced, I believe, on the market that are close competitors, that sound really good. But is this a reasonable value for somebody who's just buying their first 3D scanner? If they have your special document, which we're going to talk about.
Fair enough. I would say too, probably a big thing, at least from what I've seen with the EINSTAR, is it definitely sort of depends on what your use case is, because it does seem to have some trouble with particularly small objects. Hence the, small object mode doesn't typically function the way most people would expect it to. So I found that even in large object mode with small resolution, it still had some trouble on like little details. So anything, the size of that brace, or, a little bit smaller, was fine. But then if you got into like just like small parts or like little figurines or anything like that, it sort of started to struggle with details. And sometimes it would get like the general shape of the object, but a lot of the time it wouldn't really get the texture or the detail, or it would sort of miss little pieces. So I'd say it definitely seems like it's meant for like generally larger objects, and I don't mean that as in they have to be huge, but just relatively larger, so not like, tiny figures or parts or anything like that.
When we did our research, one of the things we found was a number of YouTube videos of people using it for car accessories, right? Like fenders
Yes.
and grills and stuff like that. And that's a larger size, and maybe they were getting more, enjoying better results. One of our friends,
Yeah.
James Clow, he did a video where I think he talked a little bit about the scanner, but he uses the scanner, and it was the same thing. He was scanning a grinder because he's adding accessories to a grinder. And again, that was sort of a larger thing. But I will say you did succeed. The brace works. It's all of about, well, I'll tell you right now. It's a sub 6-inch thing. It's about a 5.5 inch in its longest dimension. So it works pretty good. And if you look,
I would say sort of.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say. I would say sort of on that, like, sort of the level of difficulty, or like how much work you have to put into figuring out like the settings and how exactly to get it to work is sort of where that line is, I would say, because I definitely was able to get that to work, but then scanning some larger objects was definitely much easier, like sort of just one and done rather than, nitpicking all of the little settings. So just going back to like, what are you using it for? I would say definitely, from what I've seen, it tends to work better with larger objects or things you need a little bit less precision on. I mean, which I think kind of makes sense given it has a lower price point. It's sort of a slightly more basic one. So it's, or not necessarily basic, might be the wrong word, but it has less, it's easier to do the less precise things without having to sort of go in yourself and manually edit like all of the settings.
Now, there's no doubt that we could spend $50,000 and get a much cooler scanner, right? But so as you just pointed out, for the price point, it's not bad, gets the job done, and we may already be behind the curve because this is, it's already like 6 months old. I mean, it's like the old technology. Right. So you wrote a document, all your notes. Will you allow us to share that with the community?
Yes, for sure.
You don't have to worry about it right now.
Finishing it up.
Yep.
Yeah, I was finishing it up last time we talked.
Yeah, I'll make an announcement. We'll put out a PDF, and if anybody wants to pull it, eventually it'll be on our links page, pfg.gg/links, and there'll be a PDF somewhere, and we'll share that with everybody. But good job. And now you're in biomedical engineering.
Yes.
And this, this skill and certainly this technology is extremely applicable in biomedical engineering.
Definitely.
And I think we'd all have
especially considering what we made with it.
That's right. We were engineering me. That's what we were doing here. So thank you very much. You did a great internship, and thanks for coming on PFG Live and sharing.
Absolutely.
All right. Shaylie, take care. We'll see you soon. All right. Awesome. Good job. So that was Shaylie, and if you guys have any questions about that, I'll pass them along, and keep an eye out for the document that Shaylie generated on the EINSTAR. So let's see. I am looking for our slide for today. So we were just going about our business, and I was doing shipping, and I was doing stuff, and I had ordered some labels. You guys may recall that we had a change of label of sticker vendors. And the sticker vendor has to be able to make our stickers, our really cool, fun stickers, but also the sticker vendor has to be able to make our shipping labels because I use the shipping labels routinely. Every PFG stone that gets wrapped, every package that goes out, we use shipping labels. So this particular label gets used in a lot of places, and that was the slide for today. So when we switched vendors and I got my new labels, guess what I discovered? They were different sizes, and I was not prepared for that. So it turned out that I was lucky, and this is the topic of parameterizationalism in Fusion. I'm a big proponent of using parameters in Fusion. Now, what's a parameter? A parameter is like a variable that you can set, and that, all sorts of different operations in your Fusion design can pull the value of that parameter. And then you can go in and change that parameter, and it may change it in 10 different places. And in this case, I thought I was doing a really good job. I bet you see what's coming. And I created a model. Evil, I don't even know if I can pronounce what you wrote. Evil says parametrification is when parachutists come down and convert your shop to metric, ? Yes, it is. So I went back to my model when I discovered that the new labels from Sticker App were wider. They were on a wider base than the old labels from previous vendor. So I had parameterized my design. In other words, when I did the design on the label dispenser, I first had to figure out what size is the label roll. So I did some research and came up with a maximum size that the label roll could be. And I created first the roll itself as a model in Fusion. And that was parameterized. So I said, this is the ID, this is the OD, this is the width. And then I built my model around that. And in fact, here's P2. It just happens to be kicking around. And P2, did its job, and it functioned well. Of course, we made some significant changes, which I won't bore you with because we're already at P6. But it's a really nice tool. So I went in and I changed the parameter, which was called label width. And in fact, here's a physical example. If you're watching on video, there's a physical example that one was 82 millimeters and one was 93 millimeters. Why? I have no idea where those numbers came from, but that's the width of the labels. So I just went in and I set the width to the new width, and I bet you think everything was rosy. It wasn't, because I screwed up. So when you do a design, if you're gonna use parameterization, if you're gonna use parameters, you have to use the philosophy right from the beginning that you're going to use parameters for everything. And then when you make you do your extrude, you're going to extrude the amount you pull from the parameters. So for example, in this design, as you see in the picture, I extruded the walls of the label dispenser a certain amount, which is actually a tiny bit wider than the label width. And theoretically, all I'd have to do is change that parameter, and everything would move. So in the extrude command, you would have the name of the variable, not a number. Well, in one of my extrudes, I had a number. And it was really easy to find and fix. And it wasn't like I had this error happening all over the model. It was thankfully in one place. But what it did is it taught me something. And what it taught me was, when you parameterize your model, first of all, if you've never used parameters, I strongly recommend you go in and make a silly little model, a box with a hole in it, right? And you parameterize the diameter of the hole. the height of the box, etc., and you play with it. And it's in the solid modeling tab. You'll see in the toolbar, it'll say F of X, right? That's the parameter button. And by the way, you could cause that to appear in more places. That is very flexible that way in Fusion. But I recommend you, if you have never used a parameter in your Fusion design, go use it. Go do it. It's worth it. And once you get the hang of it, the workflow is in Fusion is as follows. You would say, oh, I'm going to have a thing. I'm going to want to extrude things this much, or in my case, it was the width of the label roll. So you immediately, the first thing you do is you go create the parameter, label width, okay? And, put in a representative value, and now continue and design with that. I use some electromagnetic simulation software in my antenna design work, and it has a similar feature. As you're designing chunks of the model, you can just, in their case, okay, this is called Microwave Studio. In their case, you could just type a variable name, and it will let you finish the block that you're designing. And when you finish the block, the first thing it does is says to you, okay, what value does that have? You have to give it an initial value. It won't let you continue without assigning an initial value. That's not exactly how Fusion works. So the workflow in Fusion is such that you want to make the parameter, give it a value, and then start using it. I get away with not doing that in the other software, and I just have to remember which world I'm in when I'm using it. So you could parameterize almost anything, and there's a big asterisk there. We're coming to that. I strongly recommend it. So now you can have a design like my label dispenser, and you can say, oh, I want to design it for a different roll size, and you should be able to just type in the new roll size and have the whole thing resize appropriately. It's not always that simple. There are some problems with parameters in Fusion, and the problems are mostly features that are not implemented well or at all. So this is sort of like if I had a guy from Fusion, from Autodesk sitting here, this is what I would tell him, okay? If you look inside of the box, you'll see that I use an engrave. Let's see if I get it. Yeah, there it is. So I engrave some text in a corner inside the box, which has the P value. So this is at P6. So that engraving says KP for Kinetic Precision, P6 SLW. That's me. So what I would love to have is a way to control that using, for example, a parameter. I cannot do that. So the text, which is in a drawing, which is then in an extrusion, I can't make that a variable, which we call a parameter. I don't like that. I would like a way to have a variable. Now, it's entirely possible that I just don't know how to do it, but I tried really hard and did some research, and I couldn't find it. So, hey, Autodesk, I want a way to do that, okay? That would be really cool. So that way you can modify your part. Yes, exactly. We're getting there. You could modify your part, update the P number, right? We're at prototype number 7 now. And then when you go to print it, it'll print the P7 in the appropriate place. There's another tool which works with parameters called configurations. And configurations you could think of as a higher level yet of controlling your model. And in configurations, you could have multiple configurations of the same basic design. For example, we could have a couple of different label roll sizes all set up, and each one of those could be a different configuration, and you have a lot of control in that. Yeah, there we go. Evils is recognizing that. So it would be kind of cool to say, oh, okay, this is vendor A's label and this is vendor B's label, and they're different. So I'm going to have one configuration for vendor A and one configuration for vendor B. And it would be cool to have an engraving inside the box, outside the box, that changes with the configuration. You can do it, but it's awkward. Here's how you have to do it. You have a drawing with a text box and then you have an engraving. Then you have a second drawing and a second engraving associated with that text box. And then in your configurations, you turn this pair on and this pair off. And in another configuration, you turn this pair off and this pair on. That's a little inelegant. It would be really cool if there was this parameter that has the text you want to appear, and you could just change that text and it would change the engraving or the extruding in your part. Wouldn't that be neat? So you could do it. There's some workarounds, and it's worth doing, and it's worth using the workarounds, and which is what I've been doing. So it's worth taking the time and learning about not only using parameters but also using configurations, and it's very powerful, especially in things that you do that have multiple sizes, that have multiple shapes. You could have it all in one model, and I think that's pretty neat. So that's a little bit about parameters. You'll find that, and the way I discovered this is I went into the text box when I was making a text box in a drawing to do the extrusion, and I looked for a way to make it a variable or a parameter, and I could not do it, and that's when I discovered it. So hopefully that will be coming. So Evils asks, luckily you can make a bigger dispenser that handles both rolls. So the answer is yes. So the new dispenser that I showed you, let me see if I could bring that up again. Yep, here it is. The new dispenser will handle either size of rolls just fine, but it has to be the big one. So I've printed the big one. I have to print two. So one of them I've printed, the other one I'll print. And the faceplate doesn't change, so I could use the same faceplate from before. Is it possible, Evils asks, to make a union of the two configurations that takes the width from the bigger of the two configurations? Interesting. Not that I know of. You're asking to do some logic and some math, and you can do math, but you can't do logic. So parameters can also be equations, and this is the other thing that I love about parameters. It could be an equation of other parameters. So, and that could control how your model behaves. That is very important and very effective. So that's an important thing to point out. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions that I can answer about parameters or configurations, I'd be happy to do it. But I think it's an important tool, and it'll take you to the next level as far as making more complicated designs and getting control over them. I know this was a silly thing. This was just a label dispenser, but frankly, I didn't spend a lot of time. I mean, I had to fix an error, but I didn't spend a lot of time having to redesign this because I discovered the difference in these labels, and that was pretty cool. All right. Yeah. So Evil says, as an open SCAD user, Everything should be a parameter. And I think James Clow, I think his philosophy on doing fusion designs is along those lines. I think he starts with parameters, and I have adopted that, and I think that's the way to go. Excellent point. So that's the discovery, the epiphany I had this week on parameters, and I am encouraging parameterizationalism. In fact, it's a cult. It's our new cult. So we want you to join. So I want to talk about shipping. I've had some real challenges. Well, we've talked about shipping before. And when I was thinking about this week's podcast, I thought I wanted to talk about international shipping. And then DBX says parameterization is defined as exceptionalism. Very nice. Yeah, I think everybody needs to be exceptional. I was going to whine and complain about international shipping, but it turns out that I had some domestic shipping issues, and I learned things from it. Yeah, Wes says, Art That Makes Art says, shipping is my kryptonite. So I think we can train each other how to get better and better at shipping. I'm a small business. I make and ship things that are about this size, right? This is a box of stones. This is, balancing rings. A little bigger than this is a balancing stand. And I send it all over the world. I literally send it all over the world. So I have had to learn how to do that, and I am not done learning. In fact,
I am not an expert.
I think you would agree. So one of the I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. So let's start with an old story. This is an old story about a customer up in Canada. I sent some stones up to a customer in Canada, and I sent them UPS. Well, UPS did something, decided that it needed to go via a freight forwarder. So not only when the customer got it, he had these freight forwarding fees, he had duty, and maybe taxes. And for a $300-ish order, they want them to pay, $100+ easily. And he was not happy. And of that, the freight forwarding fee was absurd. That was ridiculous. I'd like, what are you even talking about? I could have driven the 2 hours to this guy and handed him his stones, maybe 3 hours. So it turns out that I got the stones back. He refused. He didn't accept the delivery. So the stones came back, and I asked my Canadian friends, what should I do? And they said, send them USPS, United States Postal Service, which I did. And he got them, and everything was fine. And as a result of that particular episode, we started learning about Canada. So the rule on Canada is USPS, yes. UPS, no. Remember that, because this gets weird as we progress here. Here's another story. I ship stones to an EU country. I'm going to keep it vague. The stones arrive via Global Post, or they were shipped via Global Post. So it goes, and Global Post, we're going to talk about Global Post. It goes from my post office to Hackensack, New Jersey, or some collection center, right? It gets packed into a larger container. It goes across the pond. It gets unloaded. I think it was in France. I'm not even sure. It goes via Post NL, that's the Netherlands, and it gets delivered to a collection point, delivery point, whatever. Customer gets notified that his stuff is there. Approximately 2 weeks, the stuff sat there. Customer did not receive his goods, according to customer. They allegedly shipped the package back because it wasn't claimed. Package is gone. Thank you, Post NL. Now, keep in mind that this used this thing called Global Post. It's not clear to me if it's the interface between Global Post and Post NL that failed, or Post NL failed in getting the stuff back to me. The second thing is, what did the customer do? Customer says, oh, I never got notified. Yet, on all the tracking, his full address appears, his email is correct, and he says he never received any information. Okay, that's story number 2. So, story number next. Customer in Australia places an order. I ship him his stones. Guess what service I used for that order? By the customer's request, because they get to choose. I yelled at ShipStation to break apart Global Post from USPS. So now they were separate. Or were they? So it goes to customer in Australia. Customer in Australia never gets it. Tracking shows that it just vanished. So by this time, I started insuring every package because of what was going on. I'm remaking those stones for the customer and sending them out again. And we'll be filing a claim for 100% because I paid extra for 100% of that order. What was the common denominator? Global Post. So here's the problem. Global Post is owned by Stamps.com. Stamps.com owns ShipStation. ShipStation is the shipping software service that I use. Stamps.com has some sort of relationship, which I do not understand, with the United States Postal Service. All of this has made me very uncomfortable. So we're looking, I took a few steps. Number one, I fired Global Post. I turned Global Post off as an option in the software. I told ShipStation, and ShipStation had this program called the Global Advantage program that forced you to use Global Post. You were opted in whether you liked it or not. I told them you had to tell them explicitly to opt you out. I didn't like that. It left a bad taste in my mouth. So I opted out. I turned the switch off that says I will not pay for anything Global Post. We rejiggered our shipping, offered the customers. So now Australia is all taken care of. Canada is all taken care of. And some countries may experience, you may not find an option on the website right now because we're rebuilding it. Just send us a message and you will get priority. But this has not been trivial, okay? Now, Canada has a program with USPS called DDP, Delivered Duty Paid. You pay $9.95. If your package is under 4 pounds, under $500, you pay your $9.95, you're done. No duty. We like that. So that's what we're doing there. Australia says to me, please use UPS. So now there's a UPS rate, and we're ensuring that we've recalculated all that. So it's a real challenge. There's no easy, you sign up for this service and your worldwide shipping is taken care of and optimized, and there's no funny business, and they don't have ulterior motives. Like, I think ShipStation has ulterior motives because they're owned by Stamps.com, and Stamps.com owns Global Post. I think that is not disclosed, and it's unfair, and they should tell their customers. I'm telling you, okay? So now you know. I looked at alternatives, and I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but we're going to keep an eye on that. So you're up to date on shipping. I'm doing the best I can. 99% of the time, we have no problems. U.S. shipping, you'd think. Here's one more story. Customer, Redmond, Washington, orders PFG Stones. Ship the PFG Stones. In fact, I kicked up the speed because I could a little bit on the shipping, so get there a day or two earlier. Customer sends me an email saying, I think something's wrong because the tracking indicates that it was delivered to a parcel. There was some word, parcel locker or and he says, this was shipped to my home. What are they talking about? So I'm like, yeah, what are they talking about? So I did the tracking. Ultimately, I talked to USPS customer service. But first thing I did is I called the post office in Redmond, Washington, direct. Okay? Got there, welcome to the Redmond post office. Then I went on, we're transferring you to somebody. It rang 5 times, hung up on me. I did this 5 times in a row. Then I called USPS customer service main number, and I said, this is what's good. First of all, I was ready for voice, what do you call it? Customer service hell, right? You're in a queue for the next 6 days waiting for somebody to answer your call. Incorrect. I called the 800 number. I was waiting for maybe 5 minutes, and I got the nicest person ever who took the information, was attentive, gave me a case number. I then said, I did call the post office 5 times. They took that information. While I was talking to the customer service person, she says, oh, I've already emailed that information to the post office that you were unable to get through. It was amazing, okay? I did not expect this. So I relay this to my customer, and I said, look, we'll take care of you. I go to bed that night thinking I lost another one. I was not a happy camper. Next morning, customer says, guess what was in my mailbox this morning? Now, I did a little research, and it turns out that delivered to parcel locker, or whatever language they were using, happens a lot. And it's when the carrier doesn't want to finish their shift, or is incompetent, or is lazy. And they just enter because they have this system. Oh yeah, I was delivered to a parcel locker. And then they deliver it when they get around to it, or they don't deliver it. So be aware that happens. We got out of that one okay, but it's not easy. I wish I could end this on a positive. So let me end it on a positive. 99% of the time, worldwide shipping, all the stuff we've been doing, works fine. Okay? But every country, every region is a little different, and we're learning from that. Canada is not the same as Australia, is not the same as the EU, is not the same as domestic. So it has taken a while to get that all sorted out. But we're getting there. So if anybody has any questions about how I do shipping, or if you're trying to do shipping and get things sorted out, I'd be happy to share, all of this information and more. Just DM me and we'll we'll try to get that sorted out. Finally, to wrap things up, as you know, we've been on a quest for filament dryness, and we have done a bunch of interesting things. We found really good hygrometers to replace really crappy hygrometers. We were buying these $3 round hygrometers off of Amazon, and then by measurement, we proved that they sucked. In particular, they sucked at low relative humidities, the ones we care about. We went to the Sensorion sensor. Sensorion has an eval board, which I now sell in the Kinetic Precision store for this very reason. The eval board does a really good job of measuring relative humidity literally down to zero. So if you looked at the thumbnail for today's show, you'll see in the corner there is a hygrometer that's reading 2.09% relative humidity. And that is the topic of this segment. So my friend Doug and I have been working on ideas and things about, what's going on? How do we prevent our 3D printing filament from getting wet? Wet filament is not good filament. It doesn't print well. It causes problems, and I don't think I have to sell you on that. So after figuring out how to measure relative humidity, I started buying these Sterilite containers. Okay, I have a favorite one that comfortably holds one spool. It has a nice seal, and then I take a little can. The model is at pfg.gg/links. A little can of desiccant, which is a really nice design. Drop it in the center hole, seal it up, and I have a way to store filament for a while. It doesn't last as long as I wanted it to. And I didn't know why. So as Doug and I did our research, dug up papers, started learning things, light started dawning on Marblehead. Okay. So the picture on the front of, on the thumbnail is a picture of Doug built a filament housing. We'll leave the details for another time. But it's made from glass. And he dried his filament rolls, put it in this glass container. He put in, desiccant, all the normal stuff. The difference is it's glass. It's not the Sterilite plastic container. He is achieving, as you see, 2% relative humidity. Now, the record that we've ever seen, so Robin Renzetti and I have been kind of bantering back and forth about, he has a Sensorion sensor also, and he started getting like ridiculous levels. I think the lowest we've ever seen was 6. Robin might have hit 4, but in the AMS on the Bamboo, trying to get those numbers down, that's a continuous fight, mostly because it's not perfectly sealed, etc. But then Doug says to me one day, we have evidence that the moisture is just marching through the plastic. And you're storing, and my epiphany was, we're storing plastic in a container made out of, everybody say it with me, plastic. So can't the container's plastic also absorb moisture and transmit moisture? And the answer is yes. So I go and I do some research, and I find this paper that was funded by the PNNL, the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, and it was about water vapor transmission. It was about a couple of things, but principally it was about water vapor transmission through plastics. Okay, diffusion of the water through the plastic. And oh boy, this was really interesting. And the two things that just are not a problem, that eliminate the problem, are metal and glass. So a metal container doesn't have any diffusivity for water vapor. Every plastic container does, to various degrees. Glass has no diffusivity for water vapor. Okay? So one thing that Doug came up with is, and Evils, you're going to like this, an aquarium. Aquariums are very inexpensive, and they're mostly glass, as your fish know, okay? Of course, they don't come with a lid, but you can make a lid. That's right, Evils. So that's a challenge, but that's a way to get a lot of glass and 5 out of 6 surfaces taken care of. Another way, I was looking at buckets. Remember, I got a bucket for quenching oil, which, by the way, the magic words are 5-gallon pail. A 5-gallon pail with a sealable lid. Okay, and I found them on Amazon, and then McMaster-Carr also got them for me. Same thing. Okay, I think the total was $50 for pail plus lid with the seal. Metal. Nothing's going through that. You can store filament in that with desiccant. We don't have numbers on this yet, okay? But we're going to prove it. Another idea is, I used to buy filament from Overture. Overture had started shipping filament in foil pouches. The foil pouches seem to be a really good idea because the aluminum foil that is within them, I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about the see-through anti-static pouches. I'm talking about the pouches that literally have aluminum foil in them, and they're Mylar, and those things are going to be great for preventing the diffusion of water vapor. It's not because of the Mylar, it's because of the metal. So we have some experiments going on, and what we're going to do is we have a procedure for measuring the effectiveness of different containers, and we're going to come back and with Doug's help, we're going to have numbers to put on these things. But all of a sudden, it starts making sense. All of the fighting, the AMS is made out of plastic. The AMS has some leaks, yes, but the AMS is made out of plastic. All the Sterilite containers are made out of plastic. Dale just posted a picture of a filament roll from bamboo in the foil pouch. So they're taking some of their premium filaments that, if I know Dale, that's got to be the carbon-filled ABS. This was another thing. Yes, there are ammo cases big enough. So metal ammo cans, I have, excuse me, I didn't realize, but I have these 2 big metal ammo cans. These are I think they're the 50 caliber. I mean, they're huge. They might even be, I don't know which ones they are, but it's like a cube about 24 inches on a side. Okay. And for years, I've been using them for dry storage, and I've put desiccant in the bottom. And for years, this never connected. When I open them, they're daisy fresh. Well, it's a metal container, and it was designed to be so. Glass. So Dale posted a picture of glass-filled ABS, and it's coming in the foil pouches. I found foil pouches on Amazon, which look like they're the right size. I will report back. I'm not going to recommend it until I test it. I know that a couple of people are real excited about it. But those are going to work, whereas a plastic container isn't. And there's some question about the 5-gallon paint containers. I know that Unix Carbide has been using those. So clearly, the thickness of the plastic, the material that's being used, the temperature of storage, all of those affect this diffusion None of them bring it to zero. The only thing that brings it to zero is metal and glass. So we've got some recommendations in the pipeline. We will come back with hard numbers, but I think we're ready for the next generation of ideas for filament storage in the small shop. So, yeah, Evil says the metallized plastic to keep the light out. No, there are pouches that light's not going to go through, and yes, the metal is not continuous, right? Because it's some sort of a heat seal around the edges, but it's a matter of degree. There's no such thing as 100%. But the effective area of plastic surrounding your internals on a aluminum foil Mylar bag is going to be a tiny, 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 tiny percentage of the whole area. So if you can go metal or go glass, that's as good as it can get. And doing it inexpensively and doing it in a cost-effective manner is the next step. And I think we're on our way to that. By the way, the pouches, the aluminized Mylar pouches that I found were under $2 a piece for a 2.5 gallon pouch. So I think it's not only going to be effective, it'll be cost effective too, because the Sterilite containers are what, $6-7 each, and these pouches, which will hold the same as the Sterilite containers that I've been recommending, are going to be under $2 each and actually work. So stay tuned. We'll keep you posted. But I'm pretty excited about it because, when your filament gets wet, the next step is you have to go dry it. Drying your filament costs you time. It costs you electric, which means money, and it's a pain in the neck. So if we can dry filament and keep it dry, we're way ahead of the game. Yes, silicone tube wiper. Thank you, Evils. I appreciate it. I did not look it up, but I found a wiper for the X1 carbon that uses a silicone tube, and I will post the link to that. I think I posted it already in our Discord server, but I'll get it on our links page, and it's working way better than the stock wiper in the Bamboo X1C, the X1 carbon. I'm very happy with it. So I'm very sensitive to printing. I print a lot of PETG, and I get a lot of PETG deposit around the nozzle. So I have to clean the nozzle manually prior to the start of any of my PETG prints, which includes all the lids, all the trays, all of that is PETG. And having that little ball of snot form and get into your print is not a good day. So I started using these new wipers, and these wipers have been fantastic. And let me see if I can pop it up here while we're looking. If anybody else has the link that I sent you, that would be pretty useful. But it's been really good. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this quickly, so I will. I'll post it to the links page. But it consists of a small piece of silicone tubing with some slots that you cut in it using a tool that you can print, and you replace the wiper in the carbon, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I know that James Clow, I think we talked about it briefly, he was a little cautious because he was worried about hitting the nozzle on something hard and bending it. Having recently bent the nozzle, I can assure you that's not happening with this wiper. But it is very effective. So that's been a recent win as far as keeping that nozzle clean. Okay, Guys, thanks for being here. We went a little bit over. We'll see you guys next week. In the works is a special episode with our favorite Tom Lipton and Robin Renzetti. It's going to take a little bit of organizing, so it's not ready yet. But it's going to be a participation event, and just stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll get that going in the next 2 weeks. Meantime, get flat and stay flat, and we'll see you guys next week. Doink, doink.